So without further ado, let me begin by saying that, if you did not make it to this premier European interior design event, Maison&Objet, hopefully I'm not butchering my French, don't worry, we've got you covered. We're actually going to bring these design trends to you today because we have two award-winning design professionals that went to France as trend spotters, obviously with amazing and discerning taste, while being on the scene in Paris, France. Susan Wintersteen of Savvy Interiors, so if you want to wave, Susan, so folks know who you are, yes, and Anastasia Harrison of AHD&Co. Together today we'll share what they managed to discover through their lens of their regions, the East and West Coast, in terms of major European interior design trends. So it looks like everybody is here today, and why don't we kick it off by each of you introducing yourselves. Susan, if you want to start.
Yeah. So I'm Susan. I'm a designer and general contractor in San Diego, Solana Beach, California. And so I've been doing this for a little over 20 years. And also plug our nonprofit, Savvy Giving by Design. So if anybody wants to follow along there, I was excited to go with Anastasia to focus on design, build, furnish, shapes, colors, trends, trending, all of that good stuff. So I think that's I'm in sunny San Diego.
Welcome.
Hi, I'm Anastasia Harrison. I'm an architect and an interior designer. I run a practice in Westfield, New Jersey, which is like 30 minutes outside of New York City. And I was really excited to go just to experience the European version of all of the shows that we've seen. And Susan and I talked about it, and we thought it was going to be, we felt it was a wonderful experience and a great trip. So we're excited to show you everything that we found.
Thank you so much, Susan and Anastasia. And just very quickly, our agenda today is to go over the Maison&Objet trends. Designers going to select and share with you some of their favorites. We're also going to share some tips on for the future attendance of M&O, as many of you might be considering that. And of course, there'll be plenty of time and space left for you to ask any questions of our pros today. Well, why don't we begin with the trends? Susan and Anastasia, the floor is yours.
All right. Well, I think before we get started too far, I think there's a big difference between trends, trendy, and trending. And so trendy would be the things that you're seeing in the mass market today. And you go into your local stores, or there's a certain thing that keeps getting repeated at all your neighbors' homes, and people like show you photos, and this was done 3 or 4 years ago. And so as you're remodeling your kitchen, one thing we try to educate clients on is like, what is coming down the pike? What is, because there's going to be trendy, which may be short-lived, but then there's going to be trending where you'll have a whole industry move towards a different product line or a different look that is going to have that 10 to 15 year timing horizon. And then everything old is new again. And that was certainly a recurring theme that Anastasia and I saw at the market and at the flea markets, that the things that we were seeing that were manufactured 60 years ago in the 70s are now resurging back into our new trending, looking forward products. So do you want me, I'll go ahead and push the first slide and then let Anastasia chime in on that if you feel differently on the East Coast.
No. Some of the things that were my favorite were things that are captured by artisans or craftsmen. A lot of the past trends were very sleek, modern, clean lined pieces, and we're finding that handcrafted, locally made pieces, things that really showcase the beauty of what they can be, are what's the trending thing moving forwards. I think we're starting to see this romantic side of classic design coming back into the fold, and that's definitely evident with a lot of the pieces that we're going to show you next.
Yeah, and I'll touch on that also. I think that for years, we're seeing so many imports come in that were mass produced, accessory-wise and everything. And I think with all of the issues that we had in this post-COVID world and the opportunity to communicate through Zoom and webinars and market through Etsy, we're seeing a lot more artisans come back into the marketplace as a second option for them. And we're seeing them create a lot of lighting, a lot of custom things, and more direct accessibility for designers to those types of artisans around the country than we've had before. And I love seeing it because that's where the innovation and the creativity comes from, is that, artisanal craftsmanship to really separate out, the good quality products and having them here and accessible. So this was one of my favorite sconces, which is a little small to see, and we'll have some of these photos on our social media, but they were all kind of color blocked in a linen fabric and made into kind of these flowers. Because we saw, I don't know about you, Anastasia, we saw a lot of the sconces that were the flat facing. Those have been, in the marketplace for a couple of years now, but with the bulb. But what separated these out was that really beautiful craftsmanship of the artistry of creating this kind of flower look that makes lighting both functional and like almost an artistic installation if you were to use multiple on them on a wall.
Yeah. And another piece that I found, and we saw several vendors of handmade tiles. It's been large format, simple, clean tiles for a very long time. And these handmade pieces are imperfect and the color is not exact on every one of them. But that's part of why they're so gorgeous. They add texture and an element that you're not going to find anywhere else. So if you are lucky enough to have a designer that's found these tiles from Europe, we're going to bring them and place them in your home. And there were several vendors that Susan and I both just absolutely loved. And the imperfection of made them perfect, if that makes some sense. And the stone sinks was a favorite of both of ours. We both fell in love with it. Carved out of solid stone. They just have this elegant appeal to them. They're not modern. They're not traditional. They're classic in a way that will travel through many years going forward.
Yeah. I think really it speaks to the organic, but the artistic craftsmanship, right? Is that one thing that gets lost is that a lot of times we want perfect and we want it all to be just perfectly done. And with that organic kind of trending style that's coming forward, we're starting to see that we're using materials and handmade things. And when you do handmade product, and somebody's actually creating and carving and doing that, it's not perfect. It's not a machine or a CNC cutting it. The beauty is in the handcrafting and the time that it took that artist to put that sink and stone sink together. And that's the organic that we're seeing, and the artistic in both the clay tiles and the lights and the sewing and fabrics and all of that, which I think both of us really appreciate, that when you have something that's like that, it's unique in its own quality, because you're not going to find the same piece twice. Okay. More examples. Anastasia, do you want to take this one?
Okay, so again, since we both love those sinks, the sinks are up there again. But there were these, I think they were Brown Brothers was the name of the company, but they were these door handles and poles that had a weight and a heft to them because they were hand forged brass that were exquisite for doors, cabinets, and the like. And then the other light fixtures that I had seen that I kind of fell in love with were, they looked like any of the other mesh or rattan type light fixtures that you're seeing currently. But what elevates these is that they were made of a brass wire mesh, and they moved when the fixture moved. It had like give, and it shimmered with the light from outside the light and the light from within. It's really hard to see how beautiful it was with a photograph, but together they made an art installation as opposed to just a light fixture, which is a pretty consistent vibe with what we've seen with these products in this category.
Let me inject a question. With 750 brands that we're presenting at Maison&Objet, how does that compare to High Point Market that many of the folks that are joining us today are pretty familiar with? Are there any other U.S. shows that you could potentially compare it to, and how do they, stand next to each other?
I would say Susan and I spoke to a couple of other European designers that are much more frequent to the Paris markets. And one of the takeaways is to go to this show in January. We understand it's to be a little bit bigger than this show. But this show is similar to New York Now. It's not similar to High Point at all. High Point is, I don't know, Susan, what would you say? Maybe like 50 times bigger?
Yeah. Well, I think that Maison is going to be, yeah, it's different. I don't think a lot of the permanent showrooms are there like they are in High Point. So High Point being your US, if you're a US based designer, your US source for getting product, especially from, Middle Coast over to the East. I think West Coasters, it's a little more difficult to really align with a lot of the vendors that are back there. That might change over the years. But I think much more furniture based, much more large quantities, see, touch, feel, sit in at High Point, whereas this is more conceptual, I think. And it's Anastasia and I spoke to many manufacturers and vendors over there that although they will ship some product over to the US, it's not their mainstay. So we were looking more for what are they showing over in countries that are 400 and 500 years old? What are they, their history, their architecture, like what are they interested in? And is that crossing over to what we're doing over here? Because we know that these trends kind of shift by region and by time and everything else. So I think I personally was looking for more of like, what's innovation? What is it? Is it consistent? Is it something completely different? I think we identified a few things that were the same and a few things that were different.
I love hearing that, checking the pulse of both continents and making sure things are either merging or aligning for your design ideas. Talking about concepts and things that you saw, let's talk a little bit about the organic shapes that you highlighted.
You want to take it, Susan?
Sure. So, organic shapes is a really broad category. I think what we're seeing is kind of a resurgence and a reinvention of the 70s and a lot of the curves. For so long, we were in a transitional decor where everything was really squared off and we were always squaring off the arches and squaring off corners and doing all of that. Now we're starting to shift. I think, mid-century modern will always be popular. I mean, that's our staple, right? That's our go-to when we can't figure out what else to do. I think the modern curves and shapes have been around for probably, 2 to 3 years now, but we're seeing definitely expansion in the organic nature of them, not so much a retro kind of feel, but more of the soft lines and the soft curves and moving in more of a 70s inspired, but then also in some weird way, we're bringing in a lot of the 90s, the travertine, the natural stones, and incorporating those curved lines with the natural stones, which I find kind of cool. And, I'm still slightly traumatized by travertine here in California because I've taken out so much of it, but I can absolutely understand the seeing it come back, but it's not coming back the way it was in the early 90s. It's coming back in a more silver toned, bleached look. That has a little bit more of a sand-like quality, like a white sand quality versus that golden Tuscan kind of a feel from 30 years ago. So, or 20 years ago, whatever decade we're in. So I think that you're seeing a lot of round, you're seeing a lot of the, kind of funky shapes and stuff. And we certainly saw that a lot in the tables that we looked at.
And they add a bit of whimsy to the design, which is a really excellent component to intermingle into either a traditional home or a modern home. So again, part of this trending design phase is really these pieces that work really well in either camp. So you don't have to have a modern house to have these pieces. You can have a traditional house and have some of these components. You can have a classic house and have some of these components. And that's one of the beautiful things about what we did see at market this year was they cross the line on all sides and they make excellent statement pieces that would suit nearly any home.
Yeah. So even that table on the left with the arches, we've certainly seen that table made. They put a twist on it too, and they did it in a travertine, kind of a natural stone. And then that terracotta was a dining table that had those curves. So you can imagine it's just different than your traditional square dining table. It's kind of a conversation piece at this point. But I think we both selected the picture on the right, which was the really organic kind of a really bronzed, irregular, organic shaped sconce. Again, all different shapes and sizes, not two that were completely alike, but to be able to use a cluster of those on a wall and have that kind of light come through, some cutouts in the metal also was, I thought, really beautiful and a really pretty dramatic look against a darker wall.
Yeah. So many of the pieces really just inspire. So I don't know who remembers cork of the 70s. When I was a kid, I had a little bit of PTSD when I walked into this showroom, the image on the left, because I smelled the rich, dark cork. And my mom had covered an entire room with cork, not realizing what the smell would do to our house. But I walked in and I absolutely loved this piece. They were these formed pieces. It was in an art installation, and they can be placed in any shape, and it can carry you across the room, and they act as sound baffles. They act as an element that just sort of takes a bland wall and makes it beautiful. And it's not something that we've seen for quite some time, the use of cork and natural materials in such a manner. And that's one of the reasons why I picked it. And the image on the right is their chain link, right? Like they're giant chain links, not really an organic shape. But one of the things Susan and I saw was we went to the flea markets after we finished the show. And time again, we saw something that we just saw at the show. And those chain link light fixtures are a remake of, I'm going to butcher it, so I'm going to put it in the notes. It's Aldo, I want to say, I'll butcher the word, but his name. So in the 1970s, early 1970s, that light fixture was made very popular and it was quite gorgeous. And we saw the originals at market, and then we saw these at the show. And what's old is new again. And most of the people at the show don't remember the 70s, so they think it's new.
Well, and it was a reinvention, because I think that the technology obviously has come along, that these were like a C link, and I think the other ones were like the full link. And so they just kind of, and, so when people say that, inspiration, that there's no such thing as, a brand new idea, I agree in some ways, is that we're all drawing from our collective past and nostalgia and looking at how do we reinvent it and make it and put our own thumbprint on it, making it fresh and new. But the inspiration has definitely been there. And I think a lot of that, what we saw kind of harken back to days, we're old enough now that we remember these days. So it's new to a lot of newer designers, but not to us. But It's fun to see all these products kind of come back reinvented.
The theme for this year's Maison&Objet was the quest for pleasures. Did that meet your expectations? Did your eye wander? And do you think this is why some of these things that you're highlighting are kind of very whimsical, a kind of pleasure-giving type of designs?
Yeah, because there was another part of the show. There was a lot of personal products. There was jewelry, there was pocketbooks, there were candles, there were toys. There were many vendors that sold small things, jewelry, and a lot of personal things. They were children's toys, a lot of things that bring us pleasure, which it was very evident in the show. We didn't highlight those things because that's not really the market we have here today, but they were there. They were definitely there. So if you do have a retail store and are a buyer, a lot of them did have U.S. distribution for the smaller gifts. And so I can see how that does fit.
Before we jump into the next trend, let me ask each of you, when you have a quest for pleasure in interior design, what it is that you're looking for? What is that one kind of thing that might ultimately be the cherry on the cake?
Well, I like seeing things that I haven't seen a million times before. So for me, it's like an eye candy, right? It's like you can leave me in a fabric store all day and I'm happy. I can touch the textures and the prints and the colors and look and just get that visual feast. And I think that was what drew me to certain booths were, what are the visuals? How are they set up? How are the colors coming across? How are the products being displayed? So I'm looking for the best of the best. And if I glance over at a showroom and it looks like, 15 things I've already seen, done, been there, then I'm just going to pass over it until I can find the eye candy, right? And just kind of stimulate that part of my brain that's like, oh no, I want to go look at that and touch it and feel it. So I think those were the things that I think Anastasia and I were both kind of drawn to, was stuff that's different. Because really an experienced designer who does a large volume of work, you will have been there, done that many times over. And you get to a point where like, I'm not repeating that same thing. So you may want that blue and white kitchen. I'm not doing it. So I'm not the right person for you because I've done 20 of them. And it's not a bad thing. It doesn't mean that it's any less valid, but I think both of us are at this stage now where, personal style is trending, your own personal style around the things that you love, and having a designer help you curate that personal style and take care of all the details to make sure it's cohesive. Those are the things that are of value. So finding unique things that are individual to a unique client probably trumps a trend or trending or anything like that, because we're incorporating what we think is going to be a fit for them going forward.
Nice.
I can also add to that, where I think scale is very important to me. And going to these shows, shopping on the internet has become such a huge element of people doing their own homes, even how designers experience product. And you don't really get a sense of scale, like those mesh large lights I was talking about. I should have stuck my head up next to them so you could really see how big they were. But scale is so important to me in a show. And I will be drawn to those booths where, first of all, it's comfortable, right? Because you've been walking for 10 hours and you're exhausted and you want to find comfortable furniture, but also, what is the scale of it? How deep is it? How does it feel? And has somebody done something with a piece of furniture like that one piece we saw with the rolled rattan? It was quite comfortable. You want to find interesting looking furniture. You want to sit in it because you want to sell it, and you want to be sure that everybody's going to be comfortable in it.
I love that in your answer, Anastasia, your architecture training comes through.
Yeah, always.
Especially when you talk about scale. All right, pops of saturation on minimalist foundation. You just described my house.
Nice.
So let's talk about that. Susan, Anastasia.
Yeah, I am not a bold pattern on pattern pops of color person. I don't even like the word pops of color, but
so pops of saturation is better.
Pops of saturation is better. I think what we're starting to see, the trending role of the interior is really, it's going darker, it's going moodier, it's going more textured, and then you're finding saturation in larger fields. It's not a pop of color. It's the whole room is saturated in a tone. Our hotel that we stayed at was stunning example of that, where they had several different wallpapers. What were there, like 4 wallpapers in one room, Susan?
Yeah.
But they were all the same level of saturation and color. And it was quite magnificent to just sort of experience that in the space. And the show was really was showing us some of that as well. So I think that's definitely a trending design element, is this sort of saturation through spaces.
Okay, so I'm gonna that may be more of an East Coast thing versus a West Coast thing.
East Coast, totally.
So, because I think that although we have elements of moody rooms we may do in California, maybe it's our climate, maybe it's our lifestyle, whatever that might be. But what that meant to me and seeing at the show was more of a neutral base of linens and textures and colors. And I'm a big color person, so I'd love to see like more color in general, but a nice neutral base, but this intensification and saturation and really deep colors, not pastels mixed with the whites and the tans, not light things, but one element that really draws your eye to that one element, that brings visual interest to the space, but allows your eye to rest around the other. So you're focused on one intense piece, but then your eye gets a break on everything else. And so each room you go into still has that feeling of warmth and comfort and pleasing. But any one of those elements is really the whole point of the room, is because it's setting that one color or that one art piece is so intense that it's setting the stage for everything else to support it. It's like the star of the show. So I think that's what I kind of took away from kind of what I hear more here and on this side of the Best Coast. Sorry, no. Anyway, go ahead.
And on our coast,
yes,
we're sort of moving. And when we get to my final pick, I did pick an image that is, it's very exemplary of the trends that we are seeing on the east side. And it really is just swaths of beautiful color, rich, vibrant colors. The colors are like cinnamon and greens that have an olive tone to them and blues that have a green undertone and the color of the Caribbean Ocean. They're not just navy blue and forest green and orange anymore. They have a much deeper context to them. And some of the fabrics and tiles and different things we saw have different textures to them and shapes so that the light also plays on those colors. The light can really change how you see those colors, which was very exciting.
Yeah. And I think like even this middle photo here, this was actually a fabric texture of wall covering. So not a tile or anything like that, but it was an actual wall covering that would be amazing as an accent somewhere in a smaller space or over a larger wall. And then a lot of tone on tone furnishings where the upholstery was coordinated with the frames so that you had that saturated color throughout the whole thing. It wasn't one element of it that was colored, but it was the whole thing. This was some of the lights and fabrics again from the wall covering. And then do you want to talk about the picture on the right too?
Yeah, that was, I think it's the same company as the slide before with the little tiles. So they were just layers of color upon themselves. And there were these textured tiles. And there were several displays like this where it was just layers of things. They were quite beautiful. And I would never, it's not like you look at that and you say, oh, I'm going to put that in my client's house, right? You look at it and it evokes an emotion in you that inspires you to use colors in context with each other. And that's part of the beauty of some of these elements that we saw at the show was what can we take from this, use it as information for our own design minds and create something so original for our clients.
Right. And you see the color combinations there, to your point, they're not primary colors. We've got that pale pinks and the blues and the cinnamons and the mix with some goldenrod. Yellow was definitely much to my happiness represented at the show. So that was kind of nice to see as well.
And I want that banana wallpaper somewhere in my life.
Yeah.
Before we jump into your favorites, let's help audience get a little bit into your heads. Would you mind just describing your design aesthetic a little bit, or whether there's kind of designs that you tend to get excited about and work on?
Okay, I guess I'll start. Gosh, it's a really difficult question for me because I like so many different styles. So I haven't chosen, as a general contractor and designer, I'm really focused on design discovery and a design discovery phase with a client. And I'm looking at all sorts of elements around the design and to make it kind of fit, right? So look at a house that's got a Spanish exterior stucco and they want, Hamptons, whatever. I'm like, okay, we're fighting each other here with just all of the architecture and the style. And so it's really kind of working with each client on their personal style and their tolerance for color and texture and pattern. And so I'm really focused, like you'll see in our portfolio, you'll see some probably similarities, but each space is unique to the homeowner. I like to think around the things that are why they're important to that homeowner, what their comfort level is, with a certain amount of refinement, and then being able to do a super modern coastal in blacks and tans and do something else that is a little bit more, Spanish modern, that is a nod to the architecture with decorative tile and patterns. And it really is client dependent overall style. I haven't found one that I like more than another. I like the challenge of making a particular look come to life, given the parameters around a remodel. So
using the street cred, Susan, you've got a range. That's what you're saying.
yes,
And I love that.
basically, yeah. I'm mixed in market, but a range in style. So
I love that. And there's three words that I heard both of you mention multiple times during this webinar that I believe in some ways describes your shared aesthetics. But before I jump into them, let's hear Anastasia's take on her design aesthetic.
So, God, a lot of people say to me, "What's your design style?" And I don't know what my design style is. Very much like Susan, I like to work on historical homes. That's one of, if you said to me, "Here's 10 projects, pick the one you want," I would find the oldest, cruddiest house with the most amount of historical significance, and I would work with that. Would I make it what it was? No. But I would work from that. And I like to work with my clients that way as well, and finding out what their significance is in design styles and really pull it forward to be the best that it can be. I do like deep saturation of color. I like moodier spaces. I love texture. I am so excited about the trends and the trending movement of design, because I feel like it's me. It's me. Hi. No, but it is what I have always been showing. And when things were modern and clean and California coastal, that wasn't what I enjoyed the most on the West Coast. But now things are coming to where I personally sit much more comfortable in those styles.
And that brings me to the three words that I think you guys share in terms of qualities that you're looking for in your designs, which is original, innovative, and personal. Did I hit all the three marks? And I would add maybe an asterisk for Anastasia, storied, since you like the homes with a story. All right, let's talk a little bit about your favorites. Here they are. And who wants to go first?
Well, it's not fair because I like her favorite too, and that's my problem.
You can have more than one, for sure.
Yeah, but the big difference, obviously, is East Coast, you do have those older historical homes, and West Coast, my market in Southern California is probably homes that were built in the 90s. So it's not very historic, right? Like it's, I've got tract homes out here and custom homes that are older, but really our area wasn't really developed down here in San Diego to the extent that it is now, 70, 80 years ago. So we're not seeing those old historics unless you go into the older historic San Diego, which I don't typically work in. So markets are just a little different. But I love that, Anastasia, about you and your historic homes. The one I chose was this wall covering company. It was more than a wall covering company. This was actually on a stucco wall, and it doesn't really do representation. I have a whole video that you'll be able to see on some reels on our page. It was several different applications of the same pattern that you can use on vellum, that you can use on stucco, you can use on tile. If you were to use floor tile and do a white floor tile, large format, you can applicate patterns onto the tile yourself, and you can originally design them. So I could design a pattern that could go on a tile. So it gives us as designers that next level of creativity of creating something custom for a client, which we do probably, 60 to 70% of our stuff custom sometimes with furnishing. So this, if you can imagine, you can do it on windows and you can do it on shower glass doors. So if I wanted to create a look of a hand painted building or some kind of a wall covering that kind of pulled away, or a mural that pulled away on a glass door, and did a really simple tile on the inside to juxtapose that level of detail. It's a different way of bringing in that detail in a bathroom or a shower or a floor or the outside of a building or a guest house or a pool house or a outdoor cabana. There's so many applications because you can coordinate the fabric with it. You could coordinate it on the windows. You can coordinate it on glass panels, and you could coordinate it on floor tile. So for me, that flexibility within one product line for that level of creativity, it would be amazing too. And so they don't show in the US, they don't produce in the US. They are out of the country, but they will FedEx a design. And so they do it all on computerized. We order it and then they will ship it directly to us and have it installed. So I'm most excited about trying to explore that product.
Susan, we have a question here from the audience. Thank you, Granny, for a question. What is the company name of this?
I will get that for you, and I will have to send that to you because that is still in a catalog in my suitcase that I haven't yet unpacked.
No worries. And Granny, we'll make sure I'll forward you the name of the company afterwards. Thank you.
Sorry about that. I
should
come prepared.
Anastasia, tell us a little bit about the Wintola studio.
So Wintola Studio had, in my opinion, the most beautiful display. I think you remember, Susan, it was the one that had the cinnamon walls and then they were blue walls. And it was everything that we've talked about this entire webinar. It had saturation, it had texture. And I was so drawn to all of their furniture pieces. And I had to come home and do a little research on the company. And it turns out that they are Polish vintage. I think they remanufacture and reproduce vintage furniture, and the scale of the furniture was beautiful. The texture of the fabrics that they used, the colorations that they selected were very on point, and they meld with whatever design style you would have. And it was by far my most favorite of all of the displays I had seen. And then their website, if you just Google it, you'll see they have such beautiful pieces. They do everything from hospitality to residential. So it was a great collection.
Thank you for highlighting your favorites today and also sharing some of the trends from M&O. Let's talk a little bit about the tips for those that have never attended Maison&Objet. What should they expect? How they should prepare? Maybe you can help folks out.
Gosh, don't take your suitcase to Maison&Objet.
No, carry on, backpack only, cobblestone roads. Don't bring it.
I didn't do it, but
I had this giant suitcase, and it took two of us to roll it across into the subway. And don't do that. Carry on. Just buy a carry-on.
I think, all the normal things that you would anticipate, right? Comfortable shoes, bring some blister control Band-Aids, get to know other people. I mean, I think the beauty of going to the shows, especially in another country, is the opportunity to meet people at the hotel and meet people in transit that you get a chance to learn from. Designers that live in Switzerland or Belgium or all of these things. That the amount of people that we met internationally was really quite charming, to be able to hear their story and hear what their takeaways were and are, and about the things that inspire them, considering that, they're not as far, they didn't come as far as we did, but so that part was great. And then definitely the explore beyond the show, go around and see the architecture and pop into different buildings and take a look at what Paris has to offer, and then definitely get to the flea markets, because that was the most fun to see. Literally, I think I filled 2 containers in my head to bring back. So it was, it definitely worth it.
And I would also say it is a trade-only event, so you need to be part of the trade to get a ticket. A lot of American companies do show at this event. I think many more in January than September, but speak to the reps who regularly go to that show and they can give you some insider tips. I got some, my rep from Clarence House gave me some great suggestions on where to go. I went to the design district in downtown Paris. She told me which vendors to go see at the Paris flea markets. So make those connections before you go with some of your vendors, and they might offer you some insider information that will really help make the show fabulous for you.
All right, we are entering a part of our webinar where I get to ask you just a couple rapid fire questions, if you don't mind. I'll start with the first one. Do you need to know French to attend Maison&Objet?
No.
Okay, good.
Design is without language.
Yeah.
love that.
No,
That's
and
universal.
everybody, all European countries, it seems they are smart and they teach all of their citizens to speak English. So I wish we had done the same in this country, but that's a whole nother soapbox.
Yeah.
And is there one trend that you wish would go away?
Yes. Yes, I wish gray would go away forever.
No, I'm going to disagree. I think there are shades of charcoal and grays that are still very applicable and grounding in a space that aren't as harsh as a black. But I think for me, again, I'm more focused on if somebody came to me and said, I have a style that's like this, I'm really drawn to this. It makes me feel this particular way. And it reminds me of this that we did 10 years ago, whatever. I'm going to work on kind of updating from a material standpoint, like what is more functional and current and a take on it, but it's more personal style. So I don't, people will lament about shiplap or word art or, beams or whatever. To me, it's just, it's a representative of what the feeling is. It's representing a feeling that they had when they look at it. And if I can take that and reinvent that, then there might be an application that I might do a horizontal paneling. Maybe I don't call it shiplap, but maybe it looks really cool because we modernized it and put dividers in, or we did something that kind of took it to another state that wasn't what it was representing 5-10 years ago. So even though the products are the same, I think you can continue to reinvent them because they're just going to be here and people are going to be drawn to them for a feeling. And if you can get under and get into a person's head of what the feeling it's evoking is, light and bright or coastal or, nautical or whatever it is, you can take that and reinvent it and to fit into something different. So,
Having
lived
much more diplomatic than I am.
That psychology background.
No, but it's fair, Anastasia. Having lived in New York City myself for 15 years, I relate to what you're saying. Now I'm in Portland, Oregon, and I relate more with Susan as well. So I'm kind of split between the two camps. But is there a favorite museum in Paris that you love to visit or return to?
We didn't do any museums in this trip, but we did see some historically significant architecture. We went and we spent a lot of time down at Notre Dame and looked at the reconstruction of it, which was quite fascinating. And at night, it's even more so because the scaffold is a building in and of itself, right? Since it's being completely rebuilt, it's quite spectacular. I think the city of Paris itself is a museum. The architecture, the materials, just the doorways alone and the scale and grandeur and beauty of them. As Americans, we don't really have a lot of that in our everyday, especially of our cities. And just spending time in another country, you can go to London and feel the same way. Other cities around the world have their own genre, but I did not experience any. I've been to museums before in Paris, but this trip we didn't take any.
No worries. I have a question. Since Susan mentioned flea markets a few times, Joanna, one of our audience members, is asking, can you share some of the recommendations from the flea markets?
Yeah, are there going to be show notes that we can put all of these answers down so I don't have to? They're all French words, which I am terrible at trying to pronounce, and I don't want to do it publicly.
No worries. I might even do an article after this, and
okay. And we can give you all of the notes because I have several of them, and I can call it, put it together.
I have it as well, and I have one photo. Actually, my new Belgium friend who was sitting in the hotel with us. They were heading over, and I don't know. I will send this along, but it was the Paul Bert Serpette. PAU, like Paul, and then Bert, BERT, and then SERPETTE was one of the main flea markets that it's an antique market in Paris. And I think the draw and the products there that were the most appealing are those vintage pieces that you can juxtapose against something that's more modern and create that eclectic, curated style that I love, which is, I found a secretary there that, oh my gosh, I would have brought home in a heartbeat, in this beautiful terracotta with this teal color inside that was, I think, $1,400, which was incredible for the quality and the age. And it was just the historical significance would be great to like put all of that in a big container and bring over, because those unique pieces, those one of a kind pieces, although they can be recreated for today's world by other manufacturers, you're going to get that almost like a unique piece that's like, oh, it's trending today, but this is a unique style from 60 years ago. And so to have a few of those pieces mixed with today's pieces is probably what's intriguing to me, because I like the uniqueness, and I like that nobody else would have it.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you, Anastasia. Well, folks, this is it for today. If you would like to learn more about design trends and anything about business of interior design, feel free to visit house.com/prolearn. There for more information and training materials. And thank you so much for our esteemed guests today, for your insights and being our trend spotters on the ground in France. And to our audience today for finding time to join us. Everybody, wishing you a wonderful weekend. Take care.
Thank you.
You.